On March 4th, 2025, a 2017 Tacoma rolled into my shop on a flatbed. The owner sat in the passenger seat of the tow truck with a folder full of paperwork in his lap. He had just come from the Toyota dealer, and the quote they handed him spelled everything out. Complete transmission replacement, torque converter, programming, taxes and labor, just under $9,000. The truck had a shudder, a real one. You could feel it between 35 and 45 miles per hour, like someone was tapping the driveshaft with a hammer. The dealer told him the transmission was internally damaged and needed to come out. He believed them. I did not. Within 40 minutes, I had the truck back on the road, shifting smoother than it had in years. I never dropped the transmission. I never cracked a single bolt on the valve body. I used a hidden diagnostic menu Toyota built into every Tacoma and never advertised. It is a factory mode that most owners have no idea exists, and most independent shops never bother to use. Today, I am going to show you exactly what it is, why it matters more on a Tacoma than almost any other truck on the road, and how to use it to protect a transmission that Toyota quietly made very easy to destroy. Here is the thing about the Tacoma that almost no owner is told when they buy it. The automatic transmission in every Tacoma from 2005 forward, whether it's the old 5-speed, the 6-speed that showed up in 2016, or the newer 8-speed, does not have a dipstick. There is no tube, no yellow handle, no check between the lines procedure. Toyota calls these units sealed for life, and technically, yes, they do hold fluid for a long time. But sealed does not mean untouchable. It means the fluid level is not meant to be checked the old way. It has to be checked a specific way, at a specific temperature, through a specific procedure, and that procedure lives inside the truck's computer. The owner's manual does not explain it. The dealer does not show you. And almost every quick lube chain that services Tacomas gets it catastrophically wrong. I have seen this hundreds of times. An owner gets a transmission service somewhere cheap. The technician drains the fluid, refills what came out, puts the pan back on, and hands over the keys. No temperature check, no level adjustment, just eyeballed and sent down the road. 2 months later, the shudder starts. 6 months later, the owner is sitting in a service lane being told the transmission is dying. 9 times out of 10, that transmission was perfectly healthy. It was just the wrong amount of fluid in it. That is where the hidden menu comes in. Every Tacoma has a diagnostic mode called Automatic Transmission Fluid Temperature Detection Mode. It is not a secret. It is in the factory service manual, but it lives behind a procedure that looks like a cheat code. 2 specific pins on the OBD2 port under the dash, terminals 4 and 13, have to be jumped together. The ignition must be in a certain state. The engine must be warm but not hot. Then the shift lever has to move through a precise sequence. Park to reverse to neutral to drive and back, all within a timed window. When the truck sees that sequence with those pins bridged, the D indicator on the dash starts doing something it never does during normal driving. It waits. Then, when the transmission fluid temperature climbs into a very narrow window, somewhere between 115 and 130 degrees Fahrenheit depending on the year, that D light comes on solid. That is the moment, and only that moment, when the fluid level can be checked accurately by looking at the overflow plug on the bottom of the pan. If the D light starts blinking, the fluid is too hot. If it is off, the fluid is too cold. This is not optional. This is how Toyota engineered the transmission to be serviced, and it is why dealerships charge $300 for something that physically takes 40 minutes. They are charging for the procedure, not the parts. The transmission fluid in a Tacoma has almost no tolerance for being wrong. A quart too much, and the fluid aerates. Tiny air bubbles get whipped into the hydraulic circuit every time the pump spins. Those bubbles are compressible. Transmission fluid is not supposed to be compressible. When compressible fluid tries to apply a clutch pack, the clutch grabs, releases, many times per second. You feel it as a shudder. The ECU sees it as a signal that the torque converter clutch cannot lock up cleanly, so it starts commanding more line pressure to force the issue. More pressure on fluid that already has air in it means more heat. More heat means the fluid starts to break down. Broken down fluid loses its friction modifiers, and now the clutches are slipping on fluid that was never meant to lubricate them that way. Varnish builds up in the valve body. Solenoids get sticky. A shudder that started as a fluid-level problem becomes a mechanical problem in a matter of months. Go the other direction, a quart too little, and it gets worse faster. Low fluid means the pump pulls air directly, and that same aeration happens but with even less thermal mass to absorb the heat. The torque converter, which lives in that fluid, starts running dry in spots. You get a hot spot on the clutch lining, then a burn mark, then a failure. And the thing that makes the Tacoma especially cruel is that the torque converter is not a cheap part. A replacement unit with proper OEM parts, plus the labor to pull the transmission, plus fresh fluid, plus the software relearn afterward, routinely costs between $7,000 and $9,000 at the dealer. That is the exact number on the quote my customer brought in. And his transmission never had a mechanical problem. His transmission had about a quart and a half of extra fluid in it from a service done 2 years earlier at a place that did not know the hidden menu existed. I drained the excess through the overflow port while the D-light was solid, topped it back up to the correct level, cleared the adaptive memory, and drove the truck. The shudder was gone before I got back to the shop. This is the part that frustrates people when they hear it because it feels like gatekeeping, and in a way it is. Toyota did not hide this procedure out of malice, but they did not exactly make it discoverable either. The service manual is available to dealerships. Independent shops can buy access. Owners almost never see it. And because the only official tool Toyota sells for reading fluid temperature during this procedure is their TechStream software, which requires a dealer-level cable and a Windows laptop running very specific settings, most shops just skip the temperature verification entirely. They eyeball the pan temperature with an infrared gun, or they guess based on how long the engine has been running. Some get lucky, many do not. And when they do not, the owner pays for it 18 months later. There is a second layer to this hidden menu that almost nobody talks about, and this is where your understanding of modern vehicles has to shift a little. Modern Tacomas, specifically the 2016 and newer trucks, do more than just measure fluid temperature in that diagnostic mode. They also log adaptive shift data. When you trigger ATF temperature detection mode, after a fluid service, you are giving the transmission control module permission to reset its learned shift points. The transmission control module, or TCM, in a Tacoma is constantly watching how long each shift takes, how much line pressure it needed to complete cleanly, and how far the clutches had to travel before they grabbed. Over tens of thousands of miles, it adapts. If a clutch pack wears a little, the TCM compensates. If fluid viscosity shifts slightly with age, the TCM compensates. This is normally a good thing. But when fresh fluid goes in and the TCM is still compensating for the old worn-down fluid, the shifts feel wrong, harsh, confused. Sometimes drivers describe it as a truck that doesn't know what gear it wants. That is not a transmission problem. That is a memory problem. And the diagnostic mode, used correctly, gives you a clean baseline for the TCM to relearn from. I want to be honest here, because the goal is to give you useful information, not to tell you every Tacoma problem is a free fix. The hidden menu does not solve mechanical failures. If your torque converter is already physically damaged, if pieces of clutch material have shed into the fluid, if the stator bearing has come apart, or if the lockup solenoid is electrically dead, no amount of fluid level adjustment is going to bring it back. Toyota published a specific tech tip for the newer Tacomas, the 2024 models with the 8-speed transmission, that addresses this directly. If debris is present in the fluid when the transmission is replaced, the torque converter also has to be replaced, because the debris will contaminate the new unit. That tech tip exists because Toyota learned the hard way that you cannot cheat actual mechanical damage with a fluid service. The hidden menu is a filter. It tells you whether you are dealing with a fluid and data problem or whether you are dealing with a hardware problem. If you do the procedure correctly, set the fluid to the proper level at the proper temperature, clear the transmission control module's adaptive memory, and the shudder goes away. Congratulations, you just saved $7,000 to $9,000. If the shudder stays, you now have real information. You know it is not the fluid. You know it is not the transmission control module's memory. You know something inside the transmission actually needs attention. That clarity alone is worth doing the procedure. The dealership model does not reward this kind of work. A technician who spends 45 minutes in the bay doing a temperature-verified fluid service and clearing adaptations generates $150 of billable labor. A technician who writes up a full transmission replacement generates $9,000. Nobody is sitting in the back of the shop plotting against Tacoma owners. It is just that the incentive structure points toward the big number. The small fix does not pay the service writer's bonus. It does not hit the shop's monthly revenue target. So when a Tacoma comes in shuddering, the default path of least resistance is straight to the big estimate. The hidden menu procedure is technically listed as a step in the service manual, but in practice it gets skipped because confirming that a cheap fix works cuts the expensive fix out of the invoice. I am not saying every dealer is doing this on purpose. I am saying the system rewards the expensive answer, and the informed answer is rarely the expensive one. Here is what I want you to take away from this, whether you own a Tacoma or you are just trying to understand how modern vehicles actually work. The truck is not broken nearly as often as it looks. The computer inside it is smart enough to tell you exactly what is happening, but it speaks a language that requires a specific procedure to access. The hidden menu in the Tacoma is one of dozens of diagnostic modes that modern Toyotas have built in, and almost none of them are documented for the owner. If you just serviced your transmission at a quick lube, or if you bought a used Tacoma and have no idea when the fluid was last changed, or if you are feeling a shudder between 30 and 45 miles an hour that nobody can explain, the procedure I just described is the first step, not the 10th step, the first. Before anyone quotes you a transmission replacement, the fluid level needs to be verified at the correct temperature through the diagnostic mode, and the adaptive memory needs to be cleared afterward. If a shop does not know how to do that or will not do it, find another shop. It is not specialty work. It is the factory procedure. The truck I sent home on March 4th is still driving today. Last I heard from the owner, he had crossed 130,000 miles and the shudder had never come back. He paid me a little over $200 for the fluid, the labor, and about an hour of my time. He was planning to put $9,000 on a credit card the day before. The difference between those two numbers is not mechanical expertise. It is just knowing that the menu exists, knowing how to get into it, and knowing what to do once you are there. If this saved you from making a decision you would have regretted, hit like so another Tacoma owner sees it before they hand over their keys. Subscribe if you want me to keep breaking down these hidden procedures. There is a similar one on Toyota's four-wheel drive actuators that is saving people thousands, and that is the next video. If you have a Tacoma with a shudder, or you just paid for a transmission service and nobody mentioned the temperature detection mode, tell me in the comments. I read them, and those stories are the reason I keep making these. The most expensive repair is not the one that breaks your truck. It is the one that was never necessary in the first place.